obviously not the way you want to finish the match here, but just talk us through, I guess, how you thought you were playing and the chat you had with Coco at the net afterwards as well.
Yeah, it's always very difficult to it's a difficult decision to retire from a match. I know no one likes winning like that, and no one likes losing like that. So, nevertheless, I'm really happy with how I played. I'm really happy with my performance, and I hope I can make the best out of the momentum.
She spoke openly about what was truly on her mind. No filters, no dodging the question, and none of those typical, rehearsed athlete responses. Just a 20-year-old Filipina standing in front of the world and explaining exactly how she managed to pull it off, and honestly, it was fascinating to hear. After listening to everything Eala said during that press conference, one question naturally comes up. Do you think she has what it takes to make a deep run at Indian Wells and maybe even beyond? Let us know your honest opinion in the comments, but before we dive deeper into her answer, let's properly set the scene. A reporter started the conversation with a simple observation. Alex, there was such a big difference compared to your last match with Coco Gauff. The tempo right from the start looked completely different, and from there, the discussion about how the match unfolded really began. Tennis.
Alex, it was such a big difference from your last match with Coco, the tempo from the beginning. What kind of a strategy did you implement to turn the game around and to stay on top of her? And what did you think you did super well today?
I think my focus was really was a big point of my match today, and my strategy, as well as the intensity in my legs and the intensity I was able to produce to be aggressive. Yeah, I took those learnings from the last match. I tried to do things differently, better on certain things I can control. I know that Coco is a great player, and she's really going to give you a hard time. So there's nothing much you can do about the other person playing well. So I tried to focus on what I could control.
Eala had just walked off the court at the BNP Paribas Open after defeating world number 4 Coco Gauff 6-2, 2-0 before the match ended with Gauff retiring because of injury after only 55 minutes. The scoreline alone was already a major statement, but what happened next might have been even more interesting. Eala stepped into the post-match press conference, took her seat, and delivered one of the most composed, self-aware, and quietly confident interviews you will hear from an athlete at any level. And people are only now starting to realize just how much substance there was in what she said. It wasn't the usual collection of safe, rehearsed answers. There was no, I just gave it my all and the ball happened to fall my way today. Instead, Eala was precise, thoughtful, and honest. Several times she spoke in a way that made it very clear she isn't simply grateful to be on the stage, she believes she belongs there. The first topic she addressed was the obvious one, the retirement. Gauff stopped the match in the second set while already trailing by a set and down a break in her opening service game. A less experienced player might have brushed past that moment with a quick, I'm happy to get the win, and moved on. Eala chose a different approach. She acknowledged the situation directly. In her own words, nobody enjoys a match ending that way. She said plainly, no one likes winning like that, and no one likes losing like that. It was a simple statement, but it showed a level of honesty and awareness that stood out immediately. That kind of emotional maturity from a 20-year-old athlete is not something you can easily teach. It requires the ability to hold two truths at the same time, feeling proud of your own performance while still recognizing the disappointment your opponent must be experiencing, and in that moment, Eala showed she is more than capable of doing exactly that. Tennis.
You have introduced a lot of people to the sport of tennis and coming to tournaments. What do you think tournaments can do to help sort of encourage new fans who are coming into a sport that they might not know about but are sort of interested in a specific player and want to sort of learn more about the sport?
Well, I love that it's not just myself that have been bringing in different and new demographics into the audience, into the sport. Personally, I think one of the ways, I'm not saying that I know everything, but I think one of the ways is for the tennis community in general to develop in certain countries where tennis is not as big as other sports, I would say. So speaking from my experience, tennis has grown so much in my country, right? And I think that really adds to the fact that that they come and they support me because tennis is so popular now.
Eala then made something very clear. She wasn't celebrating simply because Coco Gauff had retired from the match. Her satisfaction came from the level of tennis she had played. And that distinction matters. She explained that she was genuinely happy with her performance and said she hoped to carry that momentum forward. In other words, the win counts, the ranking points matter, but the real takeaway for her was the quality of tennis she produced on the court. That kind of mindset often separates players who win occasionally from those who build something consistent and long-lasting in the sport. Then the conversation shifted toward the mental side of the game, and that's where the press conference became even more interesting. A reporter asked what specific mental techniques she uses to stay calm and focused during high-pressure moments. Eala's answer was surprisingly straightforward. She said there isn't a single technique she relies on. Instead, she explained that her ability to handle those situations has simply grown with experience over the years. According to her, it's an ongoing learning process. She talked about keeping her focus on the very next thing she needs to do on the court rather than getting caught up in the bigger picture. For her, it's about staying present, concentrating on each point, and controlling only what she can control. That approach might sound simple, but it reflects the kind of clarity and discipline that top players often develop as they grow in confidence on the biggest stages. Tennis.
Are developing genuine interest in the sport. Another example of what I'm saying is in Australian Open, there were 4 women from Southeast Asia in the main draw, so that attracted, so it was Lanlana, Mai, Janice, and myself, so that attracted another demographic that maybe was not so present in other years. Or another example is my friend Zeynep. She's from Turkey. She's been pulling in a lot of Turkish people and from the Middle East. So I think if tennis is able to develop in those countries, as it will naturally grow the sport and naturally produce high level competitors.
What Alex Eala said might sound simple at first, but the reality is that the players who consistently win big matches at major tournaments are usually the ones who understand that exact mindset. It's rarely about complicated mental systems or long visualization routines. More often, it comes down to something much simpler: focus on the next point, control what you can control, and trust the work you've already put in. Eala seems to have grasped that principle earlier than most players her age. The most tactically interesting part of her press conference came when she was asked about the difference between this match and her previous meeting with Coco Gauff 2 weeks earlier at the Dubai Tennis Championships, where Gauff won convincingly in the quarterfinals. The question was simple: what changed? What was the strategy this time? Eala's response was sharp and direct. She explained that her focus played a huge role, particularly the intensity in her legs, meaning her movement, positioning, and her ability to stay physically aggressive throughout the match. She said she took the lessons from the Dubai loss and worked on improving the areas she could actually control. At the same time, she acknowledged that Gauff is a great player who will always make things difficult regardless of strategy. Instead of trying to solve Gauff's game completely, she shifted her attention to executing her own game better. That's a very mature tactical approach, because while studying an opponent's patterns and weaknesses has value, elite players always adapt. What remains constant is your own level of execution. Eala realized that the biggest difference between the Dubai loss and the performance at the BNP Paribas Open wasn't really about Gauff, it was about her own intensity, focus, and aggression. Once she improved those elements, the scoreboard reflected it with a 6-2 lead and another break early in the second set before the match ended due to retirement. Later in the press conference, the conversation shifted to the broader topic of growing the sport of tennis. Eala gave a thoughtful answer, explaining that she isn't the only player bringing new audiences into the game. She pointed out that when tennis begins to develop in new regions, the fan base naturally follows because people feel connected to players who represent their countries. She used the Australian Open as an example, noting that several women from Southeast Asia were in the main draw at the same time, including herself. That kind of representation draws attention from audiences who may never have followed tennis before. She also mentioned her friend Zeynep Sönmez, who has been bringing more Turkish and Middle Eastern fans into the sport. Eala's point was that the most organic way to grow tennis globally is to develop the sport in countries where it isn't yet dominant, because once players from those regions succeed internationally, their supporters naturally rally behind them. It's a surprisingly insightful perspective on sports development, especially coming in the middle of a post-match interview on the same day she defeated the world number 4. The discussion then moved to her breakout performance at last year's Miami Open. Eala described that tournament as the spark that lit the fire, saying she learned a lot from that experience and will always remember it that way. But she also emphasized that many things have happened since then that have contributed to her growth, especially maturity and experience gained by consistently competing against high-level players. Rather than treating Miami as the peak of her career, she sees it as the starting point of her development. That perspective now looks accurate as she stands in the round of 16 at Indian Wells after defeating a Grand Slam champion. When asked about her next opponent, Linda Noskova, Eala answered honestly, admitting she hadn't yet had time to think about the match because she had just come off the court. Still, she praised Noskova as a powerful and experienced player for her age and said she was excited to compete in her first fourth round at Indian Wells with strong preparation and motivation. Before leaving the press conference, Eala even took a moment to send a message in Filipino back home in celebration of International Women's Day. That small gesture captured something important about her character. She balances tactical intelligence, emotional maturity, competitive determination, and a deep awareness of what her success means to the people watching from the Philippines. Just 2 weeks after her loss in Dubai, she now finds herself in the round of 16 at Indian Wells with growing confidence and momentum. She defeated Coco Gauff, handled a full press conference with the composure of a seasoned veteran, and still made time to acknowledge her supporters back home. The story keeps getting more compelling, and if you're watching this run unfold in real time, you probably won't want to miss what happens next. Tennis.